Today we're going to be talking about the Jacksonian presidency. So essentially we're going to be talking about Andrew Jackson, otherwise known as King Jackson, otherwise known as Spoil System Guy. Alright, so we got to start off with the election of 1828. So basically it was Jackson versus John Quincy Adams, the previous president. There was a new two-party system emerging. The Democratic Republicans, which Jackson was in, and the National Republicans, which Adams was in. A big idea surrounding this election was that most states had stopped the property requirements for voting. That means that most white males over 21 can vote. So now it's an actual popular vote. So that means there's going to be lots of mudslinging going on, especially between Adams and Jackson. So basically, Jackson accused Adams of corruption in the election of 1824 with Henry Clay. You know that whole situation. Then there's Adams accusing Jackson's wife of never having divorced her other husband. God dang. Okay. Jackson is seen as the man of the people. He's not catering to certain individuals, while Adams is seen as catering to the rich folk of the North. Jackson ends up winning and becomes the 7th president. Now, the spoil system. So whenever Jackson was president, what he would do was any person in the cabinet or in federal office that did not support him, he would just get rid of. And he just replace it with people who supported his campaign and his policies. It's crazy. That's what we call the spoil system. And then there's a quote, "To the victor belongs the spoils of the enemy." Again, people who oppose Jackson saw this as really corrupt. Okay, well, it is pretty corrupt, right? You're just giving out jobs to people who, well, I don't want to use vulgar language, but okay. You're just giving out jobs to people who support your campaign, and then people who don't agree with your policy, you just kick them out. That's not fair, is it? Okay, on to the nullification crisis. This is really big. The tariff of 1828 was passed to protect northern industry by taxing European goods. Obviously, the South didn't like it because they felt that it only benefited the North and hurt their cotton and grain economy. And then that led to the tariff of 1832 being released that would slowly lower the tax. But even with the tariff of 1832, the South still wasn't satisfied. They still felt that it was unfair, unjust. So what ended up happening was John Calhoun, who was Andrew Jackson's vice president, he actually kind of snaked Jackson and started supporting the states' rights, saying like, the states should be able to nullify federal law if it's like unjust. So in South Carolina in 1832, they declare both tariffs null and void and threaten secession if the tariffs stand. Now, Jackson, he didn't like that, right? He did not like that at all. He essentially tells South Carolina to suck it up and threatens that military force will be used if necessary. I mean, don't mess with Jackson, right? So South Carolina ultimately bows down, but this was still like the precursor to the eventual Southern secession. It's a very important event that's happening. Yeah, the Second National Bank. Jackson hated the Second National Bank. Oh my God. He accused the bank of looking out for the wealthy Easterners and said that the bank discriminated against Western farmers. Again, remember, he's the man of the people, right? He has to look out for everybody. This led to major sectionalism within politics about the bank, and Jackson would end up capitalizing on the sectionalism to win the election of 1832. 1832, if I recall, was Clay versus Jackson. Clay was extremely for the bank, right? He wanted the national bank, wanted a centralized banking system. Jackson obviously did not want the bank. So it was basically bank versus anti-bank. Jackson ends up winning. So once he wins re-election in 1832, he just straight up vetoes the bank's renewal. I mean, he's built different. This in turn would lead to economic downturn and inflation of the U.S. currency. That was not a good decision. Obviously, a centralized banking system would help the economy. And if you take that away, if you veto the bank's renewal, I mean, stuff's gonna go haywire. What can I say? And due to this vetoing of the bank's renewal, people saw him as a quote-unquote king, as a quote-unquote tyrant in office. So they labeled him King Jackson, which is one of my favorite nicknames for him. The Native American removal. Oh my God. Jackson did not like Native Americans. He did not like a lot of things. He saw Native Americans as inferior beings and thought that Native American removal would solve problems between Native Americans and whites. So in 1830, Jackson passes the Indian Removal Act, which required Native Americans to be removed from their lands east of the Mississippi River. But big conflict happened in Georgia, where the Cherokee refused removal and the Supreme Court actually took their side. However, oh my God, King Jackson steps in and basically just doesn't listen to John Marshall. He literally told John Marshall, like, he made his decision, now let him enforce it. Good one, Jackson, right? So in 1838, well, this is after Jackson's presidency, but like he still causes. The Trail of Tears occurs, where the 15,000 Cherokee had to trek 800 miles to their new homes, and many died on that journey. It served as a fitting reflection of Jackson's presidency.